In the peaceful town of Eagles Ridge, Pennsylvania, nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, Sarah Mitchell and her father James entered Betty's home cooking on a brisk autumn morning. Sarah's every movement was purposeful, her demeanor calm, as she guided her blind father to their regular booth. James Mitchell, a decorated Marine, lost his sight to an IED during his last tour, yet he carried himself with the quiet dignity of a man who had endured and triumphed over unimaginable adversity. His dark glasses concealed his sightless eyes, but not the resolute spirit of a veteran who once held the Navy Cross. For Sarah, her father's resilience was a daily source of inspiration, and their mornings at the diner had become a cherished ritual. Betty, the diner's owner, greeted them warmly, pouring coffee into James's mug and setting down a plate of wheat toast. The diner's regulars were beginning to fill the space, locals who found comfort in Betty's hospitality and the rhythm of small-town life. Everything about the scene felt ordinary, until the distant rumble of motorcycles broke through the calm. The sound grew louder, the roar of engines filling the air as the night riders, a notorious motorcycle gang, descended on the diner. Their arrival was a spectacle of chrome and leather, their intimidating presence casting a shadow over the diner's cozy interior. The leader, Axel Demon Cross, strode in with his inner circle, their movements deliberate and threatening. They exuded an air of ownership, as though they could command any room they entered. Sarah tensed slightly but remained seated. Her sharp eyes tracked each gang member as they spread out through the diner. Years of Special Forces training had conditioned her to assess every detail: entry points, potential weapons, and angles of defense. She noted the fire extinguisher near the counter and the heavy ceramic coffee pot on Betty's table. Her father's fingers grazed the edge of the table, a subtle reminder that he, too, was attuned to the shifting atmosphere. Well, Axel drawled, his voice laced with mockery. Didn't know they let blind men out without their seeing eye dogs. James's grip on his cane tightened, but his voice remained steady. My daughter's more than enough for me. His words were deliberate, his tone calm but commanding. Sarah's gaze met Axel's. Order something or move along, she said, her voice unwavering. Axel sneered, leaning closer. Brave words for a little girl playing nurse. James intervened, his voice firm. Son, you don't intimidate us. I've faced men far tougher than you, and I didn't need a gang to do it. Axel's face darkened, and his men shifted in place, their hands hovering near concealed weapons. The tension thickened as other customers shrank back, trying to become invisible. Betty froze behind the counter, her hand trembling as she reached for the phone. Sarah placed her hand on her father's in a gesture that could have been mistaken for comfort. In reality, she was holding him back. James still had the instincts of a Marine, and while his daughter respected his strength, she had a plan of her own. Axel's voice turned menacing. Maybe we need to teach this town a lesson about respect, starting with you two. Sarah's mind raced through scenarios. She calculated her odds of taking down Axel and his inner circle, but the risk to innocent bystanders was too great. There was only one option left. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Go ahead, Axel taunted. Call the cops. See if they show up before we're done teaching you a lesson. Sarah's fingers moved across the screen with precision. Colonel Morrison, she said when the line connected. Remember that favor you owe me from Kandahar? I'm calling it in. The name Kandahar sent a ripple of unease through the gang. Even Axel faltered slightly, his bravado cracking. Sarah's voice was calm but firm. I'm at Betty's in Eagles Ridge. Bring friends. A gruff voice responded on the other end. 10 minutes. Don't start without us. Axel smirked, regaining his confidence. 10 minutes. We'll be gone by then. Sarah leaned back, unshaken. You've got 8 minutes to leave. After that, things get complicated. The rumble of approaching motorcycles grew louder, a sound distinct from the gang's chaotic roar. This was the disciplined thrum of riders moving in formation. Through the diner's windows, Axel's men saw the first bikes arrive, ridden by men and women who carried themselves with the quiet authority of those who had seen combat. Their jackets bore no gang insignias, only subdued symbols of military service. Colonel Jack Morrison entered the diner, his presence commanding. "This town doesn't belong to thugs," he declared. "It belongs to its people, and we swore to protect them." More veterans followed, filling the room with an air of calm strength. These were individuals who had faced the world's worst and come out the other side. Axel's gang began to waver. Even the most hardened among them recognized the difference between bravado and real courage. "Your choice," Morrison said. "Walk away now, or learn the hard way what it means to face people who've been to war." Some of Axel's men began removing their jackets, their loyalty crumbling in the face of overwhelming strength and integrity. A younger gang member stepped forward, his voice shaky but resolute. "I served 2 tours in Iraq. This isn't what I fought for." Axel tried to rally his men, but the momentum had shifted. One by one, the Night Riders disbanded, leaving their leader isolated. Sarah watched with satisfaction as the gang dissolved before her eyes. "This isn't over," Axel spat, retreating toward the door. "No," Sarah said, her voice steady. "It's just beginning, but you won't be part of it." The veterans had reclaimed the town, not with violence, but with a reminder of what true strength looked like. For Eagles Ridge, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by courage, unity, and the enduring bonds of those who had served. And for Sarah and her father, it was a testament to the power of standing together, even against the odds. A new dawn for Eagles Ridge. As Axel stumbled out of the diner, the sound of the departing motorcycles echoed behind him, the rhythmic hum of disciplined riders underscoring his defeat. The Night Riders' once feared leader stood alone in the parking lot, staring at the gathering of veterans who had just unraveled his empire in a single morning. He was no longer the predator. He was prey, and he knew it. Inside Betty's home cooking, Sarah Mitchell watched as the remnants of the gang shed their patches and laid them on the counter. Each leather cut symbolized not just an act of surrender, but a step toward reclaiming their humanity. The younger members lingered awkwardly, uncertain of their future, but relieved to no longer carry the burden of fear and intimidation. Sarah's father, James, sat quietly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Though blind, he could sense the shift in the room. A palpable relief, a collective exhale from the townsfolk. Colonel Morrison stepped forward, his commanding presence filling the diner. "For those of you who've chosen to walk away," he began, his voice steady but firm, "there's a path forward. The Veterans Alliance is here to help. We'll provide job training, counseling, and whatever support you need to rebuild your lives. But know this, the decision you've made today is just the first step. The real work begins now." The former gang members exchanged glances, a mixture of hope and trepidation on their faces. One of them, a young man named Kyle, spoke up. "What if we can't fix what we've done? What if it's too late for us?" James turned his head in Kyle's direction, his expression both solemn and kind. "Son," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his own battles, "it's never too late to make things right. Redemption isn't a destination, it's a journey, and every step you take matters." The words hung in the air, resonating with everyone in the room. Even Sarah, who had spent years witnessing the harsh realities of war, felt a spark of hope. She had seen people at their worst, but she had also seen them rise again, stronger and more compassionate than before. The veterans stand. Over the following days, the transformation of Eagles Ridge began in earnest. The Veterans Alliance set up a temporary headquarters in the town hall, organizing community meetings and outreach programs. Colonel Morrison led the charge, supported by Sarah and her network of combat-tested allies. Together, they worked tirelessly to undo the damage the Night Riders had inflicted on the town. The rehabilitation program for the former gang members was rigorous but effective. They were assigned to community service projects, from repairing vandalized storefronts to cleaning up the park where children once feared to play. Kyle, the young man who had spoken in the diner, emerged as a natural leader among the group. Under the guidance of the veterans, he began organizing volunteer efforts, proving that even those who had once caused harm could contribute to healing. Sarah split her time between the program and her work at the local shelter, where she provided assistance to families displaced by the gang's actions. The shelter had always been her sanctuary, a place where she could channel her military training into something constructive. But now, it became a hub of hope for the entire town. One evening, as Sarah locked up the shelter, she found Kyle waiting outside. He held a bouquet of wildflowers, their petals slightly crushed, as though he gathered them himself. "I just wanted to thank you," he said awkwardly, his eyes downcast, "for not giving up on us." "On me." Sarah accepted the flowers with a small smile. "You're the one who made the choice, Kyle. All I did was give you an opportunity." He hesitated, then looked up. "I've been thinking about joining the Veterans Alliance program full-time, helping other guys like me get back on track. Do you think I could really make a difference?" Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady. "The fact that you're asking that question means you already are." A reckoning and a reunion. While the town rebuilt itself, the legal system caught up with Axel and his remaining loyalists. Sheriff Wilson worked closely with the veterans to gather evidence and testimony from the townsfolk. The charges against the gang leader piled up, ensuring that he would spend decades behind bars. For Axel, it was a bitter end to a reign of terror he once believed was unshakable. But Axel's downfall was more than just a victory for Eagles Ridge. It was a warning to anyone who thought fear and violence could rule over unity and resilience. The story of what happened at Betty's home cooking spread beyond the town, drawing attention from local and national news outlets. Journalists flocked to Eagles Ridge to document the extraordinary alliance between veterans and civilians, highlighting the power of community-driven change. One afternoon, as Sarah sat on the diner's porch with her father, a convoy of motorcycles approached. At first, she tensed, but as they drew closer, she recognized the familiar faces of former teammates, men and women she had flown into and out of combat zones, soldiers who owed her their lives. They dismounted with wide grins and warm embraces, their camaraderie as strong as ever. "We couldn't let Morrison have all the fun," joked Lieutenant Parker, a fellow pilot who had flown countless missions with Sarah. The reunion was bittersweet, a reminder of the bonds forged in war and the sacrifices they had all made. But it was also a celebration, a testament to their shared resilience and the victories they had achieved, both on and off the battlefield. The heart of a town. Months later, Eagles Ridge had transformed into a beacon of hope and strength. The scars left by the night riders remained, but they were overshadowed by the town's newfound unity. The Veterans Alliance expanded its operations, using Eagles Ridge as a model for other communities facing similar challenges. Former gang members like Kyle became ambassadors for the program, sharing their stories of redemption and inspiring others to follow suit. Betty's home cooking, once a quiet diner, became a symbol of the town's revival. Every week, it hosted community dinners where veterans, civilians, and former gang members broke bread together, forging bonds that transcended their pasts. Sarah and James were always there, their presence a reminder of the courage it took to stand up to fear and fight for what truly mattered. As Sarah watched the town thrive, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For all the battles she had fought, this one, the fight to reclaim a community's soul, felt like the most meaningful. And as the sun set over Eagles Ridge, casting the town in a warm golden light, she knew they had won not just a victory, but a legacy. In the end, the story of Eagles Ridge was about more than standing up to a gang. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of unity, and the unbreakable spirit of those who refuse to give up on themselves, on each other, or on the place they call home. The echo of redemption. Spring arrived in Eagles Ridge with the soft bloom of wildflowers and the scent of fresh beginnings. The town, once haunted by fear, now thrived under a newfound harmony. But while the surface showed progress, deep within the hearts of its people, echoes of past struggles lingered. It was a quiet reminder that rebuilding wasn't just about mending broken structures. It was about healing wounded souls. Sarah Mitchell had thrown herself into the town's revival, her focus unwavering. Every day brought new challenges, but she approached them with the same discipline that had carried her through war zones. Yet, as the weeks passed, the relentless pace began to take its toll. She found herself sitting on the porch of the shelter one evening, staring at the horizon as if searching for something just out of reach. James Mitchell, ever attuned to his daughter's unspoken thoughts, joined her. He leaned on his cane, the steady tap of its tip against the wooden boards grounding the moment. "You've been running yourself ragged, Sarah," he said gently. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, then sighed. "Dad, I've seen people change. Kyle, the others. They're proof that redemption is possible. But sometimes, I wonder if it's enough. Can we really erase the scars this town has endured?" James smiled faintly, his sightless eyes seeming to pierce through her doubt. "We don't erase scars, Sarah. We carry them as reminders of where we've been and what we've overcome. This town isn't looking for perfection, it's looking for hope. And you've given them that." The path to forgiveness. Among those who had chosen to leave the Night Riders, the journey to redemption was a rocky one. Kyle, who had become a de facto leader for the former gang members, was navigating the complicated process of earning the community's trust. Though his efforts were genuine, the weight of his past actions often hung over him like a shadow. One day, he approached Sarah at the shelter. "I need to talk to Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice low. "I vandalized her flower shop last year. I need to make it right." Sarah studied him, her expression neutral. "Do you think she's ready to hear you out?" Kyle hesitated but nodded. "I don't know if she'll forgive me, but I need to try." Together, they walked to the small flower shop at the edge of town. The bell above the door jingled softly as they entered, and Mrs. Henderson looked up from the counter. Her gaze landed on Kyle, and her expression hardened. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone icy. Kyle took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "I came to apologize, ma'am, for what I did to your shop, for scaring you and making you feel unsafe. I was lost, but that doesn't excuse it." Mrs. Henderson crossed her arms, her face unreadable. "Do you think an apology fixes everything?" "No," Kyle admitted, "but I want to make it right. I'll pay for the damage, help with repairs, anything you need. I want to be better." The room was heavy with silence. Then Mrs. Henderson's shoulders softened slightly. "Actions speak louder than words, young man. If you mean what you say, prove it." Kyle nodded, determination flickering in his eyes. "I will." A town united. Meanwhile, Colonel Morrison's rehabilitation program continued to gain momentum. The once disparate veterans of Eagles Ridge began working together in ways that transcended their military pasts. They established a community center in the old train depot, transforming it into a hub for outreach, education, and support. The center became a place where stories were shared, burdens were lightened, and purpose was rediscovered. Sarah often visited the center, offering guidance and encouragement. One afternoon, she found herself drawn into a conversation with a quiet older man named Frank. He had been a night rider for over a decade, his loyalty to the gang rooted in a sense of belonging he'd struggled to find elsewhere. "I don't know if I can ever really leave that part of me behind," Frank confessed, his voice tinged with regret. "I've done things I'm not proud of." Sarah leaned forward, her tone firm but kind. "Frank, your past doesn't define you. What matters is what you do with the time you have now. This town isn't asking for perfection, it's asking for effort." Frank nodded slowly, her words settling over him like a balm. "Maybe it's time I found a new way to belong." A second chance for Axel. While the town moved forward, Axel Cross sat in a dimly lit prison cell, the reality of his choices weighing heavily on him. His arrogance had given way to bitterness, but deep beneath his hardened exterior, a seed of doubt had been planted. He replayed the confrontation at Betty's in his mind, haunted by the image of Sarah Mitchell's unwavering stare and Colonel Morrison's commanding presence. One day, a visitor arrived. It was James Mitchell, his cane tapping rhythmically as he entered the room. Axel looked up, startled by the sight of the blind veteran. "What are you doing here?" Axel asked, his voice laced with suspicion. James sat down across from him. "I came to remind you that it's never too late to change." Axel scoffed. "You think a pep talk is gonna fix everything?" "No," James replied calmly. "But I think you've spent enough time running from yourself. It's time to face who you are and decide who you want to be." For the first time in years, Axel was at a loss for words. Something in James's tone, calm yet unyielding, pierced through his defenses. Though he didn't respond, the conversation lingered in his mind long after James left. The ripple effect. By summer, the changes in Eagles Ridge were undeniable. The community center buzzed with activity, the streets were free of intimidation, and businesses flourished. Former gang members like Kyle and Frank had become integral parts of the town, their actions proving that redemption was possible. Betty's Home Cooking hosted a town celebration, its porch adorned with strings of lights and the laughter of families filling the air. Sarah stood with her father, watching as the people of Eagles Ridge danced and celebrated their newfound freedom. "You did it," James said, his voice filled with pride. Sarah shook her head. "We did it. This town stood together. That's what made the difference." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the town, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The battle for Eagles Ridge had been won, not with fists or weapons, but with courage, unity, and the enduring belief in second chances. And as the stars appeared in the night sky, their light seemed to echo the truth that had carried them through. Even in the darkest moments, hope could shine brighter than fear. Eagles Ridge wasn't just surviving. It was thriving, a testament to the power of resilience and the unbreakable bonds of community. The story concludes with Eagles Ridge standing as a symbol of transformation, where past mistakes are met with accountability, and every new day offers a chance to do better. It's a legacy forged by the bravery of a blind veteran, his fearless daughter, and a town that refused to give in to fear. The long road to tomorrow. As summer gave way to the crisp days of autumn, the transformation of Eagles Ridge deepened. The small town, once overshadowed by fear, now radiated resilience and determination. Yet, as with all great journeys, the path to lasting change was not without challenges. Shadows of the past lingered, and the process of rebuilding, both externally and internally, remained complex and deeply personal for many. The Veterans Alliance Community Center, now affectionately dubbed the Ridge House, had become the heart of the town's revival. Its walls were adorned with photographs of service members, local events, and messages of hope penned by community members. Every corner of the building carried the weight of stories, some joyful, others painful, but all shared a common thread of perseverance. Kyle's test Kyle, who had become a leading voice among the reformed night riders, faced his own trial when his past caught up with him in the form of an unexpected visitor. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when the door to Ridge House swung open, and a young woman with wary eyes stepped inside. Her name was Melanie, and Kyle instantly recognized her. Melanie's brother, Peter, had been one of the victims of the gang's extortion schemes. When Peter refused to pay, the night riders vandalized his store, and the stress had pushed him to leave Eagles Ridge for good. Melanie's presence was a stark reminder of the harm Kyle had been part of. "You have some nerve being here," Melanie said, her voice trembling with anger. "Do you even know what your brotherhood cost my family?" Kyle swallowed hard, guilt weighing on him like a stone. "I know," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I'll do whatever I can to make it right." Melanie crossed her arms, her glare unyielding. "You can't undo the damage you caused." "No, I can't," Kyle admitted. "But I can try to help rebuild what we destroyed. I've been working to make amends, to show this town that we can be better." For a long moment, Melanie studied him. Finally, she spoke. "Prove it." From that day forward, Kyle dedicated himself to helping Melanie and her family rebuild their lives. He repaired the damage to Peter's store, assisted with supplies, and even helped track down Peter, convincing him to return to Eagles Ridge. It wasn't easy, and not every conversation ended with forgiveness, but Kyle persisted. Slowly, Melanie began to see the sincerity in his efforts, and while trust remained a distant goal, the seeds of reconciliation were planted. Sarah's burden. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell found herself wrestling with a different kind of challenge. As the town's de facto leader in its fight for redemption, she was constantly pulled in multiple directions. Her work at the shelter, her involvement with the Veterans Alliance, and her personal responsibility to her father left little time for herself. One evening, after a particularly long day, Colonel Morrison found her sitting alone on the Ridge House porch. The golden light of sunset bathed the town in warmth, but Sarah's face was etched with exhaustion. "You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders," Morrison observed, sitting beside her. "You know you don't have to do it all alone." Sarah sighed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "It's not that I don't trust people to help. I've always felt that if I don't keep pushing, things could fall apart." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "I get it. In combat, you don't stop because stopping means someone might not make it home. But this isn't a battlefield, Sarah. This is a community. And communities aren't built by one person. They're built by many, working together." His words struck a chord, and Sarah realized he was right. She'd been so focused on protecting the town that she hadn't allowed herself to trust fully in the strength of the people around her. It was time to let go, even just a little. Axel's turning point. Back in the county prison, Axel Cross was undergoing his own reckoning. James Mitchell's visit had planted a seed of doubt, one that grew in the solitude of his cell. The memories of his time with the Night Riders began to feel less like badges of honor and more like scars on his soul. One day, Axel was called to a meeting with a counselor who specialized in working with incarcerated veterans. Her name was Dr. Eliza Harper, and her presence was both calming and disarming. "You're not the first veteran I've worked with who's ended up here," Dr. Harper began, her voice steady. "But you are one of the few who still has a chance to turn things around." Axel scoffed. "What, you think I'm gonna join some program and become a model citizen? I think you can choose to stop running from who you used to be," Dr. Harper replied. "The man who served his country isn't gone, Axel. He's just buried under years of bad decisions. The question is, do you want to find him again?" Their sessions were grueling, forcing Axel to confront truths he'd long avoided. He began to reflect on his service, his leadership in the gang, and the choices that had brought him to this point. Slowly, he started to envision a life beyond the walls of his cell, a life where he could make amends. The Festival of Unity. As the leaves turned fiery shades of orange and red, Eagles Ridge prepared for its first ever Festival of Unity, a celebration of the town's rebirth. The festival would feature local music, food, and stories from the community. It was an opportunity for everyone, veterans, former gang members, and townsfolk, to come together as one. The festival's highlight was a mural unveiled on the side of Ridge House. Painted by local artists and veterans, it depicted scenes of resilience, farmers tilling the land, soldiers helping rebuild homes, and families standing together. At the center was a depiction of Betty's home cooking, a symbol of where it all began. On the day of the festival, the town square buzzed with life. Kyle stood beside Melanie and her brother Peter, their shared laughter a testament to the progress they'd made. Frank, the older former Night Rider, manned a barbecue station, flipping burgers for a long line of hungry kids. Sarah watched from the stage, her heart swelling with pride. As the sun set, James Mitchell was invited to speak. Guided to the microphone, he stood tall, his presence commanding. This town has shown the world what it means to fight for something worth saving," James said, his voice carrying over the crowd. "We've learned that redemption isn't given, it's earned. And we've proven that no matter how dark things get, there's always light to be found when we stand together." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers echoing into the night, a legacy of strength. The Festival of Unity marked a turning point for Eagles Ridge, cementing its place as a symbol of hope and resilience. The Veterans Alliance expanded its programs, using the town as a blueprint for other communities. Axel Cross, after serving his time, joined a restorative justice program, using his experience to mentor at-risk youth. His journey was far from over, but it was a start. For Sarah, the festival was a reminder of the power of community. She had learned to lean on others, to trust in the strength of the people around her. And as she stood with her father, watching the stars glitter above, she knew they had created something lasting. A legacy of courage, unity, and the unshakable belief that even the hardest battles could lead to something beautiful. Eagles Ridge was no longer just a town. It was a testament to the power of redemption, the strength of resilience, and the enduring truth that together, we can overcome anything. The bridges we build. Winter descended on Eagles Ridge with a quiet elegance, blanketing the town in soft snow. The once restless streets now exuded calm, a reflection of the profound transformation that had taken place. But beneath the surface of this newfound serenity, the people of Eagles Ridge were still building, repairing fractured relationships, forging new bonds, and laying the foundations for a future that honored their hard-won unity. For Sarah Mitchell, life had found a new rhythm. While her days remained busy with shelter work, the Veterans Alliance, and community projects, she had also learned to share the weight of leadership. The town no longer relied on a single person to carry its burdens. It had become a collective effort, a shared mission. A call from the past. One evening, as Sarah sorted through donations at the shelter, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering. "Sarah Mitchell speaking," she said, her tone cautious but polite. A familiar voice crackled through the line. "Captain Mitchell. It's Lieutenant Parker." Sarah's heart leaped at the sound of her former comrade's voice. Parker had been part of her Special Forces team, one of the pilots who had shared the sky with her in some of the most dangerous missions of her career. "Parker," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "It's been a long time." "I heard about what you've been doing in Eagles Ridge," Parker said, his tone a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "It's incredible, Sarah. You always did have a knack for bringing people together." Sarah chuckled. "And you always had a knack for getting us into trouble." Parker laughed, but his tone turned serious. "I'm calling because I think you could help with something. A friend of mine, former Army, is struggling. He's got a small town of his own that's going through something similar to what you faced with the Night Riders. Thought maybe you'd have some advice." Sarah leaned against the counter, her mind already racing. "Tell me more." Spreading the mission. Parker's call marked the beginning of a new chapter for Eagles Ridge. The town had become a beacon of hope, and now it was time to share that light with others. Under Colonel Morrison's guidance, the Veterans Alliance began offering training and support to leaders in other struggling communities. The program, called Operation Rebuild, aimed to replicate Eagles Ridge's success by fostering unity, resilience, and a sense of purpose. Sarah became a key figure in the initiative, traveling to nearby towns to share her experiences and strategies. She visited schools, community centers, and even prison programs, speaking about the power of redemption and the importance of standing together. Her father, James, often accompanied her, his quiet strength serving as a testament to the enduring spirit of those who had served. Together, they inspired countless individuals to believe in the possibility of change. Kyle's redemption. Back in Eagles Ridge, Kyle continued to prove himself as a leader. Under his guidance, the former Night Riders who had chosen the path of redemption were thriving. They had formed a group called Second Chances, dedicated to helping others who had made mistakes find their way back to a better life. One of their most ambitious projects was the restoration of an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. Once a symbol of economic decline, the factory was being transformed into a community workspace where people could learn trades, build businesses, and create opportunities for themselves and their families. Kyle poured his heart into the project, often working late into the night. Melanie, who had once been his harshest critic, now worked alongside him, her trust slowly rebuilding as she witnessed his unwavering commitment. One evening, as they painted the factory walls, Melanie turned to Kyle. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you hadn't joined the Night Riders?" Kyle paused, his brush hovering midair. "All the time," he admitted. "But then I think about where I am now, and I realize, maybe I had to go through all that to get here, to understand what's worth fighting for." Melanie nodded, her expression softening. "You're doing good, Kyle. Real good." Axel's new path. Meanwhile, Axel Cross was nearing the end of his sentence. Thanks to the support of Dr. Harper and the Restorative Justice Program, he had made significant progress. He had spent months reflecting on his choices, participating in counseling, and mentoring younger inmates who were at risk of following his path. When the day of his release arrived, Axel walked out of the prison gates with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Waiting for him was James Mitchell, leaning on his cane but standing as tall and steady as ever. "Didn't think you'd actually show up," Axel said, his voice gruff. James smiled faintly. "I told you it's never too late to change. Now let's see what you do with this second chance." Axel returned to Eagles Ridge, where he joined the Second Chances program. His presence was met with mixed reactions, but he worked tirelessly to prove himself. He volunteered at the community center, helped with the factory restoration, and even participated in speaking engagements, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. One day, during a town meeting, Axel stood before a crowd that included many of the people he had once terrorized. "I can't undo what I've done," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I can choose to spend the rest of my life making things right. And that's what I intend to do." The legacy of Eagles Ridge. By the time spring returned, Eagles Ridge had become more than a town. It was a movement. Operation Rebuild was in full swing, with communities across the region adopting its principles. The factory, now fully operational, provided jobs and training to dozens of residents, while the community center continued to serve as a hub of connection and growth. Sarah and James remained at the heart of it all, their bond stronger than ever. For Sarah, the journey had been one of learning to trust, not just in others, but in herself. For James, it was a reminder that even in the face of darkness, there was always light to be found. On the one-year anniversary of the Festival of Unity, the town gathered once again in the square. This time, the celebration wasn't just for Eagles Ridge, it was for every community that had been touched by its story. As the sun set over the town, casting a warm glow on the gathered crowd, Sarah stood with her father, Kyle, Colonel Morrison, and the countless others who had played a role in their journey. "This isn't the end," Sarah said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "It's just the beginning. Together, we've shown that no matter how broken something seems, it can be rebuilt, and as long as we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices rising into the night sky. And as the stars appeared above, Eagles Ridge stood as a shining example of what could be achieved when people came together, not as individuals, but as a united force for good. This captures the enduring spirit of Eagles Ridge, weaving a tale of growth, redemption, and the unbreakable bonds of community. The legacy of the town is one that inspires hope, proving that even the hardest battles can lead to a brighter tomorrow. The strength of unity. As the years passed, Eagles Ridge became more than a place. It became a symbol, a living testament to the power of resilience, redemption, and the courage to stand together in the face of adversity. The town's story spread far and wide, inspiring countless others to believe in the possibility of change. The once feared night riders were now a memory, replaced by new chapters written by those who had chosen a better path. The factory, now called the Phoenix Works, thrived as a hub of innovation and opportunity, its name a nod to the town's rise from the ashes. The Veterans Alliance expanded its programs nationwide, helping communities like Eagles Ridge heal and grow. And the people, veterans, reformed gang members, and townsfolk, had become a family, bound by their shared journey. The Mitchell legacy. For Sarah and James Mitchell, the transformation of Eagles Ridge was deeply personal. They had fought not just for the town, but for the values that had guided them through their lives. Loyalty, courage, and a steadfast belief in the good that exists within people. On a quiet morning at Betty's home cooking, Sarah sat across from her father, the familiar aroma of coffee and fresh toast filling the air. James, now in his twilight years, still carried himself with the dignity of a Marine, though his steps were slower, his voice softer. "You've built something incredible here, Sarah," he said, his voice tinged with pride. "This town, it's better than we could have imagined." Sarah smiled, her gaze drifting to the window, where the morning sun cast long shadows across the town square. "We built it together, Dad. And not just us, everyone." James nodded, his hand resting on his cane. "It's a reminder, isn't it? That no matter how dark things get, there's always a way forward, as long as people are willing to fight for it. A lesson for all." The story of Eagles Ridge holds a lesson for anyone willing to listen. Change begins with a single act of courage. It starts when one person chooses to stand against fear, injustice, or despair. But true transformation comes when that courage inspires others to join the fight, not with weapons or anger, but with compassion, resolve, and the belief that no one is beyond redemption. Eagles Ridge taught that strength isn't found in numbers, intimidation, or power. True strength lies in the bonds we forge, the risks we take for each other, and the willingness to see the humanity in those who've lost their way. It's in the quiet moments of forgiveness, the steady effort to rebuild, and the unyielding hope that tomorrow can be better than today. A brighter tomorrow. Years later, a plaque was installed in the center of the town square, inscribed with words that captured the essence of Eagles Ridge's journey. In honor of those who believed in second chances, who stood together in the face of fear, and who taught us all that even in the darkest times, the light of unity can guide us home. And so, Eagles Ridge continued to thrive, not as a perfect town, but as a place where people embraced their imperfections, learned from their mistakes, and worked tirelessly to build a better future. Because in the end, the greatest victories aren't the ones we fight alone. They're the ones we achieve together, united by the shared belief that no challenge is insurmountable when we stand as one. Eagles Ridge wasn't just saved, it was reborn, and its legacy would endure, lighting the way for all who sought hope in the face of darkness. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.